Everybody?
Looks great.
Okay. So I call this presentation Clean Kid, Dirty Grid, the case of the dangling kilowatt hours, because at least half of the people who contact me were early solar adopters who were very proud of covering their energy load until they couldn't. As they electrify their homes and their cars, and their personal solar power plants cover just a mere fraction of their new electric load, leaving what I call dangling kilowatt hours, which is even worse than those dangling participles in English class, if you remember those, but you probably don't because you're not as old as I am. People come to me actually in near panic because they call or email me because they don't want to pay for primarily fossil nuclear electricity that's only 14% renewably sourced and percentage-wise becoming less so every year. Most people I serve are in this NY-GEO territory, and here is a 16-year account of proportionally dwindling renewable and emission-free electricity. You might think, oh, well, that's just NY-SEG. We know about NY-SEG. Other utilities probably do a lot better. But then we look at those other utilities, and the utility fuel source mix all looks about the same percentage-wise. So the reason for this is that even though power plants infrastructure varies a great deal through New York State, as the New York-ISO points out in its tale of two grids that you see here, the source mix of each utility is really defined by the number of RECs, renewable energy certificates, and ZECs, zero emission certificates. The Public Service Commission requires them to purchase each year. So the remaining fossil energy is distributed, or I call socialized, based upon each utility's sales to end users. In any case, here you are with your electrified home, a clean kid with a dirty grid, because unfortunately, you do not live in one of the 35 municipalities with their own zero emissions electric utilities, or in one of the community choice aggregation municipalities with 100% renewable electricity contracts. Instead, you live in a town or a village or a city that uses the primarily fossil nuclear mix we produce in New York, wondering how in the world we're going to reach our goal of 70% renewable electricity by 2030, and how they're going to pay for an increasingly pricey renewable ESCO plan instead of the utility plan. So several years ago, there were plenty of reasonably priced renewable electricity ESCOs. Now the pricing for the last two remaining standing ESCOs, 100% that are 100% renewable, and actually just one if you count customer care as important, are now, whereas they were like a third of a cent different from the default the default plan, are now 3 to 4 cents higher. The RECs are 3 to 4 cents higher than I don't mean the RECs. The price per kilowatt hour is 3 to 4 cents higher than the default utility mix, minimally. The options for subscription solar are, a lot of people come to me to ask questions about subscription solar, are few as well, and they used to be more, and for the most part involve somewhat of a long waiting list. Part of the wait of the projects has been stuck in the interconnection queue, as you probably are well aware of yourselves. This is just NY-SEG as of November. Of course, those who own their own solar panels do not have the option in New York State of community solar. Okay, this is a chart I made up that I find pretty interesting. Here you can see that year to year, with the exception of less nuclear and more fossil fuel, which, as you know, is predominantly natural gas, there isn't much change. That pinkish top portion of the bars is the gigawatt hours of electricity that we use beyond what we produce. So when the New York ISO says we're at 27.5% renewable, that's 27.5% of our production. But this counts, but number one, this counts biogas, biomass, and also solid waste, which the CLCPA will not allow to be counted. That would bring us down to 25.6% renewable. And also because we use more than we produce, as we see here, that percentage should read more. If that little pink area or yellow, whatever color you see on there, is not renewable whatsoever, which I haven't analyzed, then we would be down to 21.1% renewable. Because CLCPA 70 by 2030 refers to the end user, not the producer, not production. So as you know, with the electrification of homes and buildings, this end user bar height on the end here in 2022 is a moving target. So our renewable energy production may increase, but our demand could continue to outpace it. So meanwhile, back to the clean kid and dirty grid. I think we all need to focus on how we can avoid paying for dirty grid kilowatt hours and reduce our overdependence on the grid by minimizing our home energy load in order to maximize our solar coverage. And so with my clients, I follow a 4-step plan, and that I think is very important. And I ask whether you agree or disagree. Step one, get a home energy assessment just to see where you are. Step two, make sure you have adequate insulation and sealing. Step three, right size your heat pump system. Of course, most people need qualified installer in order to do that with the manual J and other methods to do that, and covering your load. Then when you know what your load is after you've electrified, then you can hopefully cover your load with on or off-site solar. And while Jens Panakau's mantra is what we get from the borehole, we don't have to get from the grid, which I agree with. My mantra, I will add what we reduce and produce ourselves, we don't have to get from the grid, with added benefits of comfort and low operational expense. So my advice to homeowners is draw down your energy load, power it with your own solar power plant, reduce your dependence on the dirty grid. And with that, I'll end and ask if you have any questions.
I don't see any immediate hands, but we'll give people a minute to think about that.
I'll comment something that I didn't know, that the CLCPA 2030 affects the end user. So I'm just thinking how that gets quantified at that micro scale per house. That seems like a super hard thing to do.
Yeah. Exactly.
Okay. Yeah.
I think a lot of people don't realize that. I know Buck Howarth does.
Yeah.
guess I'd say I find it kind of depressing that we seem to be going in the opposite direction. Thank you, Gerri. I was feeling good today until this.
Well, I was, and then I thought I'd spread it around. No, just kidding. Yeah, of course, the absolute numbers are different than the percentage numbers, but the percentages are going in the wrong direction. Yes.
So it looks like one of the things you're losing is the nuclear piece.
Yes.
They're closing nuclear plants.
Indian Point.
So here in Jersey, we have two big ones down in Salem County. They're along the Delaware Bay. They were built for 40 years. They were licensed for 40 years. And when we got close to 40 years, they said, well, we really can't shut them down. So what they did, they turned around and extended the license another 30 years. So we still have nuclear.
Do you?
It's making our power expensive because every rod that has been used is still sitting there on the property and not figured out where to put the waste. So nuclear is expensive, but it is at least still contributing to, I guess, what we could call green, right? We're not just shutting them down and replacing it with fossil fuel.
Right.
I
right.
see, folks, I see Bob's hand up. Good comments. Thank you. We'll squeeze Bob in here. Go ahead, Bob.
Yeah, my apologies if this is like too meta or high level or something like that, but I've been getting increasingly sort of worried recently as I see these presentations. It's, first of all, it's wonderful that in sort of common discussions now, people are talking more about heat pumps than they ever have in the past. It used to be just solar, wind, and hydro, and now it's, you know, renewable energy and heat pumps and other stuff comes in. So that's wonderful. But I'm worried that there's so much focus on the technologies. And particularly in your discussion, you're advocating for heat pumps and you're advocating for solar. It sounds like you're talking about two things, but actually those are both instances of one thing or one sort of general concept, which I don't know, it's probably not a sexy name, but it's site-sourced renewable energy. And I wonder sometimes if it wouldn't be better for us to advocate for people to use the more general terms rather than just focusing on the technologies. I mean, if you've got solar versus heat pumps, you can argue about which is best, without having sort of first come to the conclusion that, oh, but what I do want is I want site-sourced renewable energy. And so now what I really ought to be doing is figuring out which is the most efficient way or the most effective way to do that. So anyway, it's not a criticism, just an observation. When you've got two things which are instances of one thing or one idea, sometimes it's better to talk about the general idea rather than the specifics.
Gerri, you want to comment on that?
I'm not sure I totally understand what Bob is saying, but I do think it's critically important to make the heat pump sizing a relevant matter in wanting to cover your load with solar. So I think they're very distinct in that respect, because of the ordering of things. Because if it's potentially possible, let's say someone guts their house and wants to start over and they say, oh, which should I do first? Where are the incentives the best? That's a terrible place to start, in my opinion, you know, because you want to draw down maximally before you power your grid so that you don't have those dangling kilowatt hours that people just really hate. By the time they get going with their homes and renovating their homes, they get really excited about being like purists. You know, they hate seeing that NY-SEG bill come in with its dirty energy. They really do. We got to get rid of that.
Yeah, I guess I would just say maximize your site-sourced renewable energy. But the other thing I was
They
curious
would have
about
no idea what I'm talking about, but
well, we have the opportunity to teach, but just a comment.
okay.
I understand the issues. One thing I was you didn't mention was that I believe New York State and New York City are working on pulling down more hydro from Canada, in order to fill in that 25% thing,
Right.
that pink's, do you have any data on that, or when that's gonna happen, or how much is
I
gonna?
think they started the project. I don't recall the timeline on it, but it's pretty long.
I think it's at least 2 years from completion. I'm in Poughkeepsie, and I know that we've got lots of attention on that from a dredging up of the river near our water intake stuff. So it's a slug. It's going to happen, but it's not going to be quick.
Right, but the question is, will it happen before 2030?
I think it's scheduled
Yep.
to, yeah, like
Yeah.
I think so.
26.
So how much of a problem do we have if we assume that the Canadian hydro's power is going to be coming down?
That's a possibility. Bob, I was it 2 months ago. I was in Quebec, met with Quebec Hydro, and they were concerned that they're trying to get, most of Quebec is already electrified. They're trying to get incentives for those people that have electric heating to go geothermal. And part of the reason is that they can grow and they can sell the power to elsewhere. So there's no confidence that they're going to have a lot of power to go anyplace else unless the incentives that they put out are going to be adopted by the citizens, I guess, if you want. So they're looking at all different avenues, and including the CO2 heat pumps, which I brought up a few months ago. And so there's no, they feel, because there is a growth. Last year, Canada brought in 1 million people from immigrants. So that's 1 million people is like 33%, 3% of the Canadian population. So I don't think there's a guarantee. We're going to be meeting again with Quebec Hydro in about another month, because we have some interesting technology we want to talk to them about. We'll see how far along they are with this. So I don't think this is fully guaranteed that you're going to have surplus power. In fact, they're worried about in the next 5 years.
I think it's also it's not year round, right, Gino? It's the power line coming down the Hudson is only for certain times of the year. Summer, I believe, for sure. I think you're muted,
you're
Gino.
muted.
If that's the case, then that's probably an issue that NY-GEO and other people in the industry should be working on, because it's entirely possible that people believing that the world will stay the way it is today believe that summer peak is the issue. But I think all the indications that we've had are that if we're successful, the winter peak should start becoming a significant problem somewhere about 2035 to 2038. We should probably begin the process now of ensuring that the planning is in place to ensure that we can meet peak demand in 2035 and 2038. It sounds like it's far away, but when you're talking about bringing cables down from, northern Canada, and government and doing things, the fact that we've got 10 to 15 years to work on this problem isn't nearly as much time as you think it might be.
Yep. Okay, Bill, your hand's up, question, and so is Jim's.
I would rather not say this with NYSERDA people and Con Ed people here, but we're having a problem on Long Island with oversized systems. And Gerri, that's your step 3, which is exactly right. Right size your heat pump, but the way the rebates are structured, they pay per ton. And that encourages short loops and bigger heat pumps. And that's not the direction we want to go in either. And I'm just wondering if NY-GEO can come up with a more effective way of rebating these systems so that that's not an issue, and then they could we could share that with the utilities, because it's not helping us. I was just had a conversation with the head of renewable energy, John Francisquino, our former president, and he says they're pushing, they are reducing geothermal heat pump. They're changing the way they are incentivizing, rebating geothermal heat pump systems, partly because there's a much bigger adoption of air source heat pumps. And partly, of course, it's because the people who do the home energy audits recommend that because they can install it and they can't do geo. But part of it is that it's more popular. It's more in the public ear and eye. And they also have to, the way it's structured by, I believe it's NYSERDA, is that they want to get lots of houses and lots of buildings on board, and it's a lot easier to do it with air source heat pumps because they're cheaper and people will jump at that. So the better product, which is geothermal, is relegated to a lower status, and as a result, they're lowering the rebates, the rebate formula, which means less people are probably going to go with geo. And we have just found a place where between all the tax credits with the federal and state and the rebates, geothermal was about the same price as air source, and now that's going to be changing. But the real problem is, as I said to John, is that if you're trying to get people to pick the better choice, that's the one that should get more rebates to drive more people to that market, and that marketplace will grow. But instead, they're doing the opposite. They're going for the easy stuff because then their statistics look good in terms of in terms of heat pump adoption, even though it's not the best one. And it's a real problem because of some of the way, the unintended consequences, some of the way these things are quoted. I'll use don't use it as a verb. The quote based on the quotas and other things. And again, I said, if you're trying to get people to buy a certain product, isn't that the one you're going to give coupons on and rebates and incentives? And it's not the way that they're thinking at the Long Island Power Authority's subcontractor called TRC. They seem to be doing the opposite. So there's a number of things happening on Long Island that were depressing. And I felt good after being at a New York Propel meeting today. And now Gerri, and then who else was it? Started Gino. I was going to this weekend, feeling pretty good about things, and you too.
Well,
I will get over
I got a
it.
solution. I have a solution. That's a Billy.
Good.
So-
But I'll get over it. But it's I feel a bit like back and forth on this.
I'll find out more about the Quebec issue in the next couple of weeks, and I'll let you know. But Billy, one of the solutions we have, back in 1990, we started the CSA standard on geothermal. One of the reasons we started that is exactly that. We said some dealers were putting in a 4-ton heat pump and 5 kilowatts of backup. And the other was going to put in 15 kilowatts of backup and a 3-ton heat pump and 20 feet of borehole. So we said this is going to be a Wild West, and we started the geothermal, the 448, CSA 4048. 6-7 years ago, it became through EXPA, it became binational. So right now, this is the last revision. Every 5 years is a revision since 1992. This now is going to be part of the both north and south, northern and southern border. And the building codes and some of the codes locally are adopting this system, this CSA. One of the things the CSA says 90% of the heat for the home has to come from the ground. So basically, that is a big deal. And otherwise, it'll be, now it could be that 55% of the peak heat loss is that. But 90% of the total heat for the course of the year will be coming from the ground, even though it's the peak load could be, let's say, 20 kilowatts, and the heat pump gives you 15 kilowatts. You're still within that 90%. 10% overall, so it comes in, and also you stage it. So there is hope in this. I'm going to give you some good news that apparently back on the at the last New York ICSPA, they're saying that there'll be soon that most jurisdictions in the U.S. are planning to adopt the CSA standards, which now is binational. So, anyways, I'll leave you with the good news today. How's that?
Thanks, Gino. I see Bob's hands up, Jim. So we'll go Jim, then Bob. But first of all, comment, our NYSERDA and our Con Ed folks are friends. They're members. I don't think you're going to hurt their feelings, Billy. Everybody's here to learn. But before we go to Jim, if Andrew or Scott or David want to comment, feel free. If not, I don't want you to feel any pressure to have to respond. Okay. David, was that a hand raise or?
Yeah, sorry, I had to authorize this Zoom to use my mic and all that stuff. But I was listening. I missed the first 30 minutes of this conversation. But Billy, I heard your comments. Yes, I hope we're friends. So
you're among friends.
Yes, I agree with John. I can tell you at Con Edison, we are we're a little bit different, I suspect, than Long Island. But in our territory, the incentives are currently $35,000 per home for geothermal and $10,000 for air source. So we are putting the incentives behind the technology it's more efficient. So yeah, I agree with you. And we did move to a per home incentive away from a per capacity incentive for a number of reasons, but one of them was exactly the one you were articulating, which is we didn't want to create any sort of weird incentive for people to mess with the sizing that they would otherwise deem best, right? So have a flat incentive per home.
How do you do that when the sizes of the homes, especially on Long Island, vary from like 1,500 to 15,000 or 20 or 40,000 feet square feet?
Yeah, so we don't operate in Long Island. We're New York City and Westchester, but you do have some large variation in the size of the homes in Westchester too. We struggled with that a little bit, but we decided there was something equitable about a flat incentive for any residential customer, and we think there's also some benefits. There's operational benefits for, I think, us and others to have not have to figure out what the incentive is, and then there's also some marketing benefits for a flat incentive, right? There's some marketing benefits to be able to say simply like, here's what the incentive is if you are a residential customer. Yeah. So
yeah, exactly.
Thanks.
Thanks, David. Bob, I love your comment. If you have 40,000 square foot home, you don't need incentive to save money. I'm not in that category, but let's go Jim, Bob, and then Amanda, you're on deck.
Okay, well, just some thoughts about the kind of power that we're going to need. About 4 years ago, I got involved with NY-ISO because they hadn't really included any heat pumps at all in their projections out to 2050. I think Bill got involved with me a little bit, and I had a meeting with these folks to convince them they started to need to have some projections of how much power they were going to need. So their first try at it, I think about 3 years ago, the peak load was going to be about 72 gigawatts, which is roughly twice the amount of total power generation at the time. And as Gerri's pointed out, you've lost a nuclear plant in the meantime. So this is an immense amount of power that has to be replaced. Now, we've talked about offshore wind. Jersey just lost the windmill farms that they were going to put out there. I think it might have been somewhere in the order of 1 to 2 gigawatts. So we're talking about major shortages there, but it's only 1 or 2, not 30 or 40 gigawatts shortage of power. And from what I understand, the hydro that we can bring down from Quebec is maybe about 1 gigawatt. And it's not going to be available all the time because the Canadians are going to take their power first and they'll sell us the residual. So the only way that we can really get around this, unless somebody comes up with some nuclear fusion pretty quickly, is that we need to drive down the demand. And that's been our big argument with geothermal. And I think, as Gerri says, a lot of customers want to put solar in. Can they offset? Yeah, if they have a nice south-facing roof, they can offset a lot of it, as long as we still have net metering. But there's really a rub here, because solar is only during the day. The peak is going to be at night in the winter. We'll have wind, but there is going to be a serious shortage of gigawatts, and we're not going to be able to bring enough down from Canada. And whatever you put in the transmission line in Canada, not all of it makes it downstate. There's serious loss in those transmission lines. So it's a huge problem that we just can't sidestep. So that's kind of my comment about that. There's some pluses and minuses, and I guess this is where the whole concept of using hydrogen kind of comes in, because we can at least split water into hydrogen and oxygen when there's excess solar, which if we keep putting in cheap solar panels, we may have excess solar. And then at nighttime, we can run hydrogen and burn it with that oxygen they split off to have pretty much emission-free power generation. But that's a huge undertaking as well, to build the electrolyzers and the storage tanks for the hydrogen and oxygen. So I'm hoping that the power guys are listening. Our power generators really need to step it up and be able to provide the kind of power, especially if they want to still put out a lot of air source heat pumps. They're going to have a lot of peak demand. So
Thanks,
that's my thoughts.
JT. Appreciate it, JT. Bob? And then we got Amanda. Oh, I'm sorry, Bob, Bill, and then Amanda. Go, Bob.
Yeah, look, you know, we've been talking about this for years, okay? And we need to be constantly pointing out to people, we cannot sustain a heating system where with a high market penetration of air source heat pumps, okay? And it isn't just because of the energy production problem that Jim was just talking about. It's also the distribution problem, okay?
Mhm.
It's, you know, you need to be less worried about the production. Frankly, if people are willing to pay the price, the competitive market is going to produce the power. The problem we've got is that the power is then distributed through the utility systems, and the utility system is not part of a competitive market. It's all wrapped up in the infrastructure planning process of the rate making system, okay? And we already see now, for instance, Con Ed spent you know, hundreds of millions of dollars on the Brooklyn Queen demand management project, not because there wasn't enough power, but because there wasn't enough infrastructure to move the power around, okay? And we're going to see in the state, if we switch over to a high market penetration of air source heat pumps, we're going to see not just that we're not generating enough power, but we don't have enough capacity in the grid to move it around. Mm-hmm. The other thing you have to understand is that if people do what they often do, and Bill, my apologies for my comment last week. I was probably smoking dope or something, but anyway, sorry, that's a private comment. But if people do what they often do, which is they install air source heat pumps as air conditioners, and they use gas or oil, or there's still about 100 people in New York that use coal. Okay, but if they use gas or oil for heating, what that does is it reduces the sales of gas, okay, while still leaving a requirement for 100% of the gas infrastructure in place. The result is that gas prices will go up dramatically. Okay, in fact, gas prices have to go up in inverse proportion to the reduction in gas demand, okay, because the fixed costs of the gas system, the costs of the gas system are largely fixed, okay, and so you have fewer, if you have fewer therms to spread the costs over, the price has to go up. So what's happening here is people that are advocating for air source heat pumps without requiring a complete removal of the fossil fuel load from the homes, they're guaranteeing us a problem with the capacity of our delivery system, capacity of our production system, and they're accelerating the rate at which gas prices will have to go up because when you've got declining demand, the price of gas delivery has to go up. The fundamental message we need to teach, first of all, is tell everybody, we cannot have a system which is reliant on air source. And the other thing is that today we're spending all this money to get people to move from fossil fuel systems to heat pumps. You have to understand that in 10, 15, 20 years, we're going to have to do this all again to get the air source people to switch from air source to geothermal, okay? This isn't a wild idea, okay? We will not have enough capacity to serve everybody with air source. We're going to have projects like we have today, okay? Home by home subsidies, et cetera, incentives, and God knows what else, okay? Because the only way we're going to be able to keep an affordable grid is by getting the people who have air source to convert to geothermal. So do you want to go through two conversions? From gas to air source to geothermal, or do you want to go from gas to geothermal? That's what we have to be working on.
Hey, Bob, the thing is that this is the hybrid systems, gas and air source, is what they're pushing.
The hybrid system idea is absolute bullshit. Anybody who works for a utility must know that. The only reason you would advocate for a hybrid system is if you are simply trying to push the problem out beyond the point of time in which you retire, okay? The hybrid system approach reduces gas consumption without reducing the requirement for infrastructure. It reduces the revenue, okay, that comes in, or the units sold, while leaving unchanged the costs of providing the service. That means that the per unit cost of the service must increase. This is not a theory. This isn't an idea. This isn't a projection. This is simple math. If the units are reduced, but the costs are the same, the price per unit must increase, okay?
Exactly.
Okay, the hybrid idea is absolute bullshit, and the people who work for the utilities, for NYSERDA and the rest, they know it, okay? But it's convenient for the shareholders at the moment to prevent them having shock of realizing what's going to have to happen to their system.
Okay, that's a good note with Bob. I don't mean to cut you off because I always love listening to you. We've got Bill on stack, and then we've got Amanda who is going to share some stuff with us from a board perspective. We can always continue next time. You guys, every time we send out a flyer, it says, send me information you want to talk about, and we're willing to do it. So, Bill, go ahead. Thanks for being patient.
I agree with what Bob just said, and I would have said that if he hadn't said it. But the main reason I went on stack is because I wanted to welcome AJ to this meeting. I don't know if AJ has been on many of these sessions. I don't remember him being on it, but we didn't do introductions at the start. And AJ is one of our founding members. His company is Aces Energy, is very prominent in the Rochester area. And I just wanted to let folks know that we've got a prime New York GEO member on this call that maybe they hadn't been introduced to in the past.
Thank you, Bill.
Okay, now you're on the spot, AJ. Any thoughts?
No, I appreciate the introduction, Bill. And like you said, we're doing a lot of residential and getting into a fair amount of light commercial and getting involved in a lot of commercial loop field outdoor portion projects. So just excited to be back on a couple calls, and I'll poke in when I can, you know, so.
Love to have you. Thank you. Okay, Amanda, we got you a little bit of time here. Just turn it over to you.
Oh, thank you. Bill, was that all you wanted to say about AJ? I didn't know if you had more to say there.
I could talk for a long time, but I just
Okay.
wanted him to be introduced and recognized, and his company's great. I've been to some of their projects in the Rochester area. Really wonderful.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks AJ for coming. AJ is a big time water furnace dealer, so it's always good to see you involved with NY-GEO as well. So yeah, introduce myself, Amanda Schneck. I'm the Northeast sales manager for water furnace. It's been good to listen to everybody, the discussion today, really heavy, kind of high level stuff. But really what water furnace is, we're a manufacturer and we're basically focused on the end user, you know, providing the decarbonization, electrification solution, you know, selling heat pumps to contractors like AJ, you know, realizing that it does take a long time to really scale a market. And we are really hopeful for the future with everything that's coming. We see the same writing on the wall that I believe everybody on this call sees. And I've said it on the last call, but we're more than doubling the size of our factory. So we can really ramp up our production to serve the market and the future needs we're going to have to reach all these goals. So it's really exciting. I represent product both on the residential and our full commercial side. We've had a lot of product innovation over the last 3 to 5 years into basically geothermal water source chillers. So that's a water to water machine that can really good retrofit for wet-based systems. You know, bigger decarbonization is needed to reach these goals. House by house is awesome, but that's going to take a long time. So with the growth of the 10 projects, you know, UTENJA, thermal energy networks, we want to look at like a full system approach and be able to support product applications on whatever is decided to do, whether it be a school or single family homes. So from a board perspective, you know, 2024 continues to be very, very busy. We have 2 conferences this year, one coming up April 8th and 9th, I believe, Monday, Tuesday. It'll be a one-day event with on Tuesday, but a vendor happy hour and some mix and mingle if you want to see folks like Water Furnace on Monday night. But we are going to keep the Albany conference to one day. I'm on the planning committee for that with NY-GEO. As a board member, I'm also the treasurer. Christine does a really great job with everything, so my load there is pretty light, but that's pretty much my involvement. I know there's a policy committee, and Bill, I really appreciate all the effort, but I am so all hands on deck that the policy side to spend, you know, a heavy amount of time is just, we are so busy on that end user and the sales and you getting the equipment in the field that is just a little beyond at least what I can do right now. So, you know, broadly speaking, everything we experienced through COVID with pricing and supply chain, we're pretty much out of that storm. You know, Water Furnace is back to our standard lead times that we held for over 35 years. We're building, you know, more factory. We're adding more staff. You know, we are, I believe, on the right path. It just unfortunately takes a while. And that's what this is going to be, in my opinion. You know, I've been in the industry since I graduated from Bard College in 2007. And to see how long 16 years took, it's like, okay, what's the next 15, 20 years going to look like? And how do you really scale that up? And it's every part of the chain. And that's just, you know, that's a big, heavy lift. But I do believe we'll get there. It's just to continue to grind away at it. So that's pretty much for me and my comments. I'm happy to take questions. Unfortunately, Zach, who is the NY-GEO vice president, he's not feeling well. He's actually at the doctor's office. I don't know if he happened to join, but I'm happy to take any questions since we have a little time left.
So just real quick on conference, Amanda, thanks for that. I want to acknowledge the sponsors that are on this call, some big ones. So Amanda with Water Furnace is gold sponsor. Gino with his company, Ground Heat, is a gold sponsor. NY-SERDA, who's on the call, is our presenting sponsor. So I want to shout out and say thank you to all of them for supporting the conference. So in addition to registration, the sponsorship and the exhibiting is important. We are a not-for-profit trade organization, and we secure our revenues through the conference as an education. So we really appreciate that. So thank you.
Amanda, you said something earlier to me about going to an AHR conference. Is that a display of new equipment?
Existing equipment, new equipment. We're doing a big product launch on Monday, January 22nd. We have a new product commercially coming out. That's a really big deal for us and hopefully for the market. So check out our website 2 weeks from now. See if it's live on there. You can get the scoop, but until then, it's top secret. You have to be in Chicago. You got to come to the conference. I don't want to spoil it. So, but yeah, we'll have existing equipment there, residential product, commercial chillers, package equipment, console equipment. So it's an opportunity for us to continue to share what we offer the marketplace at the AHR show.
Okay, great. And thank you personally for your willingness to help spread the word about some of our legislative tax credit stuff. I'll follow up with you on that
Great.
in a bit. Okay, other thoughts or comments, questions, requests? Got my pen handy.
Okay, so I just want to confirm with Bob Wyman, my background came from GE air source heat pumps back in the 70s. And GE had the best heat pump with the Climate Tough compressor. One of the reasons why I converted to geothermal back then was because we had issues with air source heat pumps. Exactly what you mentioned about defrost. And that hasn't changed much. Some of the heat pumps are better now. They're cold weather heat pumps. But Bob, in order to have an air source heat pump, you have to have a higher the power package in the house. So in the event when there is time to convert to geothermal in the future, you don't need to change your power in the house. You already have it. So that's the good news. Yes, that's it. That's all.
Well, the good news, Gino, if you put GEO in now, you don't have to worry about it at all.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
It's
Absolutely.
any house.
Absolutely.
So
but we converted from oil to gas.
yeah.
Now from gas to air source heat pumps, and now air source heat pump back to GEO.
Well, I think the important thing too to understand is if you do go to GEO today, your neighbors will not have to pay for you to go to GEO tomorrow.
That's right.
If you go to air source today, in 20 years, your neighbors will be paying for you to move to GEO.
There's been 3 generations of air source heat pumps. There was one generation in the mid-60s, and you couldn't even bring it further north than the Mason-Dixon line. The next generation, they were able to do, let's say, it's South Canada and maybe northern. And now there's a 3rd generation, but they all have the same issues, weather and defrost, and that doesn't change. And you're going to use the most electricity at the worst time of the year, at the peak times. Unfortunately, that's the only sister product we have for, I guess, for electrification. There's no, I mean, besides baseboard heating, there's nothing different. Unfortunately, but they're selling hot. They're really selling well now. They're 10 times, 8 times, 10 times the geothermal. Unfortunately, we have to figure out a way how to install geothermal also in a week, so that when the furnace comes down, we're able to move in there and install it within a week and have almost like an army idea as to how you mobilize fast when there's a problem. And it's going to happen. It's going to happen. Just unfortunately, may not be fast enough.
Okay, folks, I'm watching the clock. guarding your time, and want to thank everybody. Gerri, wonderful presentation, great lead off. Amanda, thanks for the surprise we'll be looking for in a couple of weeks. Our next meeting is on the 26th, and maybe we'll be ready for that announcement. AJ, glad you joined us as well as everyone else. So we'll see you in a couple of weeks. Have a good weekend.
Take care,
Thanks,
everybody.
everybody. Good to see you all. Thanks, Gerri.
Good to see y'all.
Thank
Happy
you.
New Year.
Thank
Have a
you.
good weekend.
You too. Bye-bye.